Do you ever find yourself talking about how much your business makes or what your income is, how many hours you work, how much you do for everybody? If this is you, then I want to talk about in this podcast how you may be trying to prove your worth and how that is completely futile. Welcome to the Peak Revival podcast. My name is Vesna, and today I'm going to talk about, are you trying to prove your worth through your work, through your income, through your mothering? Okay, this is a really hot topic, and I would say for 99% of the women that I speak to in my community and in my work, this is something that is a core belief. I recognize it well. I would say it's still a part of me as well, that core belief that if I do more and I achieve and I am successful, then I'm more valuable. And we can get caught up in this busyness, right? So if you find yourself, even in this time of the year, if you're really busy or you find that you're doing so much for everybody else and, like I said, maybe you're talking about how much your business makes or how big your launch was or how much your income is, or it could be even things like maybe you work hard to prove your worth through achievements. You have a nice house, you have a nice car, your business has this many people working for you, your children do this, or you look like this, or your weight is this number. So really looking for that external validation to prove our worth. And traditionally, this was something for men, okay? Men would feel more worthwhile if they were the provider and they earned a certain income, they earned more than women. And obviously today, this dynamic is changing. There are a lot of female breadwinners. I think about 40% of women are the female breadwinner or the sole breadwinner. And so that dynamic has shifted, and that creates all of its other complexities, which I did a podcast on called The Female Breadwinner, so you can listen to that afterwards. But I really want to speak to, are you trying to prove your worth through busyness and trying to be so important and valuable for everyone, or your place in your career or in your profession or in the business world in order to feel like, I'm valuable, I'm good enough, I'm lovable. And I think it's a really important thing because it's often a core driver for women to lead them into burnout or exhaustion or resentment and just feeling really unhappy with their life. So the underlying core belief here, actually, before I get into that, I want to share that, I think I've shared this before, that in the beginning of my business, when I opened up my first clinical practice, I didn't have any patients yet, and yet I was working all day until into the evening, until about 6 p.m. And my then partner would be like, let's go home. And I'd be like, no, I'm not finished. And he was like, you don't even have any patients yet. What are you doing? I'd be like, I'm working on programs and treatment plans. I'm putting all these programs together. And I just felt like if I wasn't busy, I wasn't valuable, I wasn't adding value. What am I doing? And so that was still that underlying belief that if I work harder than everybody else, I'll prove that I matter. And that's the core belief under trying to prove your value in what you do. I'd love to hear your comments below if you can see the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, because I think this is such an underlying core belief in so many women, and it drives us to do more and achieve more. And we never get to that place where we feel like we're really valuable. We never stop and can be like, I'm just going to give myself a week break or a month break, or I'm going to say no now. I'm not going to help anyone right now. I'm just going to take care of me without feeling guilty, right? Without feeling like, oh, I'm lazy. Oh, what am I doing? I just feel like I'm not doing enough. So it's such a hidden driver or belief that's false. It's a false core belief that a lot of us carry. And so, like I said, for women in business, I see that, that core belief is if everything runs smoothly, then I can finally relax. Or when I hit 7, 8, 9 figures, then I'll be successful and secure, right? And if you stop, you'll lose everything that you built. And so there's a real dependency on your level of doing and busyness in order for things in your life to be successful. And therefore that's tied to your value. Like I remember having a client who was a very successful CEO, and she said to me one day, she came to me for burnout, she had a whole bunch of other health issues, and she said, do you think I'm a workaholic? Do you think I'm just trying to prove I'm worth it through my work? I was like, well, what do you think? Because even she was starting to see her patterns, like she was driving herself into the ground. She was not having any boundaries around her time, and she was placing more stress on her team. And she was like, but why am I doing all of this, right? It doesn't even make sense when you stop and have time to reflect. I think if you're working so hard, I heard this health coach say the other day on Instagram, and it was a really powerful comment. He said, he was referring to some very successful online business people. who make a lot of money and, are very open about how much they make. And they would never be able to spend that amount of money in their lifetime, right? There's no way. Maybe they need 10 lifetimes to spend that amount of money. Yet they're still driving very hard as if they are poor, right? And you hear successful people talk about this, right? You've got to work every day like as if, you can't pay the rent, even if they're billionaires. But the thing is, when you're driving yourself that hard, you're neglecting your well-being. You don't have a relationship with your family. You don't have a relationship with your friends. Because these people, they were like saying, you shouldn't have a weekend. You shouldn't catch up with friends. You should say no to going to a friend's wedding because you've got to work. It was all work, 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 work. All for material gain. And that was what they said. It was for material wealth. And, you've got to look at that and think, well, what's driving that? Because that's actually not natural. Our natural response, our human response is to take care of ourselves. We have an innate will to live and an innate will to take self-care. And when we ignore that, that goes against our human nature. So it doesn't make sense. So there's a driver there, right? I'm not saying you can't drive to be successful and whatever, but I would look at where that's overriding everything else. It's overriding how, if you're exhausted and depressed and you're not loving your life or you're crawling into bed at 7 p.m. because you're so tired, then I would look at that there's some kind of core belief that is not serving you anymore, and that needs a bit of awareness. And the most important thing that I want you to take away from this podcast is, if you've noticed you reach a level of success, and I've noticed this, you get there and you're like, great, that's the new level of success now. Right? And then you get there and you're like, okay, it's going up here now. And it doesn't end, right? And so if your self-worth is tied to that, or your value, you're never going to feel valuable. You're never going to feel like you're good where you're at, right? You're good enough, or more than good enough. You're very valuable, you're very amazing. And that is because when you feel that, your worth, you'll only chase your worth through your work, it's when you're temporarily disconnected from your innate wisdom or your innate well-being, okay? Because your innate well-being is never in question. Your innate well-being is giving you security, gives you self-love, gives you self-worth. So we don't get that from the outside. It's a feeling, right? And so when we feel like we're chasing it through our work because we feel insecure, right? And quite often we carry this, right? We feel insecure about ourselves, the way we look, the way we show up, the way we speak, how much money we make, whatever it is. And so that insecure feeling comes from our thinking. And that insecure thinking is a temporary disconnection from our innate well-being, because our innate well-being is always flooding us with security, with love, with value. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So it's not something that we can get from the outside. We never can. We can only ever experience it from an internal feeling, because feeling valuable is a feeling, okay? And our feelings come from our thinking. So therefore, they don't come from the outside, okay? Which is why we can achieve so much and never feel like we've arrived. And so if you're feeling like that, there is nothing that you need to do. You don't need to reframe. You don't need to put up more boundaries. You don't need to do any of that. What you need to be able to see is that there'll be moments where you're not chasing, where you feel like you're in a really good place, where you feel like, you know what, I'm awesome, I'm amazing, I'm really good at what I do. And that is the truth, and everything else isn't. So there will be times when you're slowed down or you've got mental clarity and you're not disconnected from your well-being, that you will feel those things naturally, because that's naturally what you're made of, right? That's naturally inside of you. It's all the busyness, it's all the trying to do everything outside that actually quietens that inner voice. Okay, so self-worth is never, or your value is never in question, right? You are valuable as you are, no matter what you do or don't do in your life, okay? You decide if you're valuable or not valuable through insecure thinking. And that is just something that when we disconnect from ourselves, that's what we feel, and that passes. Which is why you can feel secure, insecure, or valuable, not valuable, not valuable. Like I had a client who was saying the other day she gets triggered by speaking to a certain family member and she feels very insecure, like she's not good enough. And so for her to see that before she gets on that call, she's already triggering so much insecure thinking, she's already feeling insecure, then she gets on that call and that button gets pressed, right? Because it's been pressed so many times through her constant thinking. And so it's easy to go, well, that person needs to stop saying those things or changing. And maybe, but really the power is within us, okay? The power is within her to not feel insecure anymore. When she recognises, and when I recognise, and when you would have seen at times, I'm creating my own insecurity. I'm making this stuff up. So I hope that was helpful, because I know that this is something that comes up in our work all the time. Women feel like they're really trying to prove themselves. And I think now more than ever, like I said, I'm no stranger to this, right? I'm definitely someone who's seen much about this for myself, that the more you do, the more valuable you feel, the more you achieve, the more income you have, the more, materialistic things that you have makes you feel like you're more valuable. And it's a trap, right? Because those things can't bring you value. Okay, and I think, like I said, it's something that comes up in our work all the time, and I wanted to chat about it, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave me a comment below.